The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Good morning, everyone. I've spoken to some of you this morning, but we're so happy you're here in the middle of the summer in July, sitting here at 8:30 in the morning. So happy you're here. I know we have some people who are new in the room. We partner with two important groups. The professional organization in this state, TESOL, has been our partner since the very beginning. We have our president here today, and she'll greet you later. And we have other people in the room who have been with TESOL for some time. Raise your hand if you have been involved before or now with TESOL. Raise your hand. Yes, okay. But and a regular partner that shows up every time we do this is the Tennessee Department of Education. So this is your chance, y'all, to talk directly to the department and ask questions. So get your questions ready. They're gonna do a double session today, cover a lot of stuff, but have your questions ready because we're gonna do Q&A. So I'd like to introduce Raven Cleveland, who is Manager of English Learner Strategy, Tennessee Department of Ed. And then joined today, Raven is joined by two practitioners from Rutherford County Schools, Christina Danko and Dr. Chris Tennyson. So happy y'all are here, so I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be the first group. Sometimes I've had the after lunch spot, which I'm very happy to be able to listen this afternoon, but I get you when you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? So I'm very excited today to be bringing you something. I got something for you. And I'm hoping that it becomes one of your favorite things this year as an ESL teacher. I have the privilege of introducing the new Tennessee ELD and ELA standards crosswalk. So this is something new. You guys get the first sneak peek at this project that we've been working on, the ESL working group and the ESL standards collaborative, ELD standards collaborative. And we get to share that with you today. So let's just get started. We have this brief disclaimer that if you're using any type of AI notes to record this meeting, as Dr. Clark said, this meeting is going to be recorded and you'll be able to access that later. We would ask that you not use any kind of generative AI tools during this presentation. But we do have this Padlet QR code, and on every blue slide or kind of a change of pace slide during this presentation, you will see this Padlet code. Here's where we want you to ask questions as you go throughout the presentation. You're going to have a lot of questions. There are going to be some questions we have the answers to, and there are going to be some questions that we just don't have the answers to yet. And you're going to help us figure that out. So this is the Padlet code that you can use throughout the presentation to start adding your questions. And then, like any good lesson, we do have some learning objectives today. We're going to talk about why we decided to go ahead and do an ELD standards crosswalk. We're going to unpack it with our team of lead facilitators who helped create the document. And then we're going to practice using it in 3 ways today. And hopefully by the time you walk away from here, you'll be able to jump in using this tool, taking it back to your district to help practice, not just in the English language development classroom, but also in any classroom where ELs are. So I want to start by talking about how we're going to bridge English as a second language policy and ESL practice. And so thinking about, what is the need for an ELD standards crosswalk? And we talk about the purpose of aligning ELD standards to ELA standards. So not just that the fact that it's in our ESL rule, but also we want to make sure that all students have equitable access to grade level academic content. And you'll hear this message from us again and again. This is the most important thing for students. We want every student to have the opportunity to learn. We'll talk about those beliefs in just a minute. But we also want to build a bridge between language development and content development. And as we think about that, we know that policy isn't just something that's written, it's also interpreted. And where we see that a lot of ESL teachers can tell us about the fact that ELD standards and ELA standards need to be aligned, there's trouble doing that because they are interpreting it different ways. So we're here today to help clarify that a little bit and help you bring to your district, your school, or even your classroom an interpretation of how we're going to align those two things together. We know that academic language is not ancillary. And we know that it's best learned when it's done in context. So these standards that this crosswalk that we're introducing today, these ELD standards that were introduced in August of 2024, they're a way to help our students be in the content classroom and still get that equitable access. And we know that it's happening simultaneously, that language doesn't happen in a bubble. And so we believe that by using specific forms of language, students will be able to access content better. So the main purpose of our crosswalk, again, studies show that limited integration of ELD standards in the general education classroom setting. Many teachers know that they need to align, they just don't know how to pair the two together, particularly when we're using high quality instructional materials that kind of dictate what that objective is going to be or what that standard is. And without it just written there, many teachers are like, I don't even know which part of language, which language function, which language form I should be working on. We also know that ELD happens in the margins of instruction. So it's not something that's always at the forefront of our minds when we're teaching, but it should be. And we believe that the Tennessee ELD crosswalk will bridge the gaps. So because our new standards were introduced in August of 2024, were adopted by our State Board of Education in August of 2024, we really felt that there was that need to have the crosswalk for those purposes I just told you about. And so beginning last winter, we started talking in our ESL working group about forming a collaborative where educators from across Tennessee could come together, talk about what are the needs in the general content classroom. And we had facilitators from each of these starred areas on the map of Tennessee come together, 36 educators from across Tennessee, both general content teachers and EL teachers who applied for these positions and were chosen to work. And just right down the road in Smyrna, we came together for 3 days, 3 intensive days, to build this work for you. The first thing that we did when we had come together as a group is talk about the purpose, the need for these things, and then decide, what do we believe about English learners? And why is that important before we even start this work? And what we said is that we believe that all students are language learners. All students. You are a language learner. I'm a language learner. Anyone that enters our door are language learners. And because of this belief, this tool is going to be great, not just for English learners in your classroom, but all students, in building that language across the way. This tool does specifically focus on English learners and the development for those English learners in 4 categories that 2 of our 5 lead facilitators will present today. So it's my pleasure today to, again, reintroduce Christina and Chris, 2 of our lead facilitators who led groups talking about this work, and they're going to share with you the first look at these standards.
Several of you may know me. I'm Chris Tennyson. I teach in Rutherford County Schools. I'm a veteran teacher. I've taught middle school and high school, just about everything. I currently am a sheltered English 1 and English 2 teacher. And as someone who's been in the state a long time, as many of us have been, I think this is some of the best work that we've done to support our grade level teachers and help them. And I just want to thank Raven, because this has been a huge undertaking. So can we give another round of applause to Raven? Because this is huge. You can go.
And I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Christina Danko. I work as one of the district ESL specialists for Rutherford County Schools. And I work primarily focused on English language development and what we do in those programs that support our English learners. And just a huge testament, this document is made continuously with teacher voice, having teachers engage in the work and getting to share what they feel like is important for our students to engage in, so they can really have learning for all students, and it can be used for a tool for all educators.
All right, so I want you to briefly take a few seconds, maybe 60 seconds, and I want you to read through these. And I want you to pick one that you believe very wholeheartedly in. These are ones that we as a collective group of standard Crosswalk people agreed on. And I want you to pick one, and then I want you to discuss with your neighbor what's the one that you feel is most important. That we're all mostly ESL teachers, so we're going to take this work back to our faculties and staff. What is something you really want your coworkers to work with? So.
With the right support.
All right, I'm going to bring us back to the center. 3, 2, 1. Y'all are awesome. So how many of you agree with 1? That's the one that you think? 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Next slide is about language development, and we want you to do the same thing. What are the things on this the one thing that if you could get your colleagues to agree with this, or your colleagues already agree, that you feel you could have that strong co-working atmosphere? Go at it, ladies and gentlemen.
Connected and should be integrated, not isolated.
Yeah,
You don't
because you're
send them
thinking
off.
as an admin.
I'm thinking as an
Yes.
I agree. Because I think when I think about our district and our teachers, that's a piece that we're...
All right, I'm going to bring you back together. 3, 2, 1. I do want to say, number 1 for me, that last line, across multiple contexts, is at the heart of what we did and why we did what we did in this crosswalk. We want other teachers to see that it's among all of the classes they have that they are using and growing their language.
And if you've been in the field in any capacity of second language acquisition, you know that instruction has dramatically shifted in the way that we're trying to approach language development and incorporating language into students' learning. And so here we collected some beliefs about how English learner instruction should be kind of given. And so what I want to challenge you to do in this slide is to look through them and kind of think, if I could pick one that I want every teacher that I'm exposed or I'm interacting with to truly believe with me, what would be the belief you would want them to incorporate into their own instruction? They're all great, and so I really just want you to kind of focus in. You could pick all of them, but which one do you really want teachers that you're interacting with to truly believe about English learner instruction? All right, and we'll quickly come back. When I kind of look at those lists of beliefs for me and making my own personal goal for this new school year, I really want to engage in this idea of shared responsibility for our students. I think it's such a valid belief that these students all belong to us, and that we're all responsible for the instruction and education that we provide to them. And so that's a huge goal for me personally in my own professional endeavor, is to try to really get all teachers to believe that idea of shared responsibility.
All right, thank you all, and we're going to move on to why we're all really here. So we know that standards are the basis of what we do. Even if you teach ESL, you're probably looking at your grade level standards, and there are so many important things, and we know that the standards is what makes our ability to make sure that a child that comes from third grade from Memphis has similar learning expectations when they move to Nashville or Murfreesboro or Knoxville or Lenoir County or other places. And they are required by law, but even if they weren't required by law, we know they're a good practice.
So with that, there's a huge shift to this idea of standards are not your high quality instructional materials. I know when I used to engage in a group with planning, just even for myself, we would say, what are we teaching? And sometimes we would cite that standard. Oh, we're doing main idea this week. We're doing author's purpose this week. But it's really, that's a very isolated way to think about instruction. Really, those are the tools and the behaviors that we want our students incorporating into what they do when they learn. Using those expectations to reach those goals, to reach the targets that you set for them. And so it's really, the standards are that common expectation of where we want all students to get to at a certain point within an age or a grade level, or within a course. Those are kind of really your targets that you're trying to reach, but it's not the sole way to deliver. That really comes from this median of what are you teaching? What is the content, and how do we want students to engage in that content? And really, when our students are doing the work, they're using multiple standards at one time. It's not just author's purpose. It might be main idea, citing evidence, author's purpose, and they're incorporating all these behaviors into what they're doing, and we need all students to be doing that. So really, it's a huge shift from, it's not just the standard that we're teaching, it's really using the high quality materials to get students to reach those set expectations.
All right, we know that last summer our state adopted new ELD standards. There's 10 standards and that's it. And we know each and every one of those has a role and a purpose in all instruction. So we went from, we have over the years gone from a purpose of possessing language to actually using language and how we can support our students' language use. And that's really what our new ELD standards help us do. They help us focus on how we're using language to eventually go out into the workforce. So that's our goal, right? We want our students to be able to be participants, as my mother used to say, they can participate in society and give what society needs from them. So through that shift, we have done the ELPA standards, and there are 10. So here's your QR code. If you don't know and the standards are new to you and you're new to serving language learners, then please scan the code and it will give you the standards. All right? It will explain them to you more in depth than we're going to get into today. We know the first 7 build on acquisition and progress toward engagement. Language is no good if you don't use it. I always tell my high school boys who are slightly unmotivated sometimes to sit in school, please forgive me, those of you that speak Spanish, más inglés, más dinero. If the more they speak English, the more money they're going to make. Because let's face it, again, we're preparing them for post-high school. Even if you teach kindergarten, you're getting your child ready, your student ready for when they graduate high school. So these standards help our students use that language so that they can function in society after they get out of high school. And then the next ones kind of go into the discourse, the word phrase, the sentences. How are they putting it together to show that progression of more complex language usage?
So kind of thinking through how does this all incorporate into our instructional practice, because that's really what we're here to talk about today, is really how do these ELD standards fit in to the incorporation of all instruction in all content area. And that Crosswalk tool is really where we're getting at to try to help support all teachers with that work of how it incorporates. So thinking through the incorporation into your instructional practice, thinking through our instructional practice guide, we start with this idea of standards 1 and 8 really being focused on receptive language. So where does that start? That starts with your high quality instructional materials, in particular a complex high quality text, right? Language can't be learned in a bubble, it can't be learned in isolation, it can't be learned in isolated practice. So you really need to gear everything to engaging students with language. And so that kind of comes into this idea of that high quality text, really honing in on core instruction 1. And so when you're doing that, students are engaging in that receptive language learning. They're able to read, they're able to view, they're able to listen, and they're getting language inputted. And then you shift over. So like taking your questions, taking your high quality, rigorous questioning, prompting for language, students are able to then become productive with that language. They're able to start outputting it, either by speaking or writing or just having communication or interaction in the classroom. And so we start to engage in that productive and interactive language that's referenced in standards 3 and 7. And then interactive 2, 5, and 6. So the more we're prompting as teachers to get students to engage with each other, to use the language that they're learning, then we're able to start activating and really building in on our core instruction area 2 and 3. And so doing this work for any student really is the goal of all instructional practice, right? We want kids to engage and we want kids to output and we want kids to interact with what they're learning. I'll give you a second just to hopefully really kind of think through that interaction. It's huge for our English learners. It's really a way for them to kind of build up connections that go beyond just their singular groups. And getting them to be able to communicate and use that language that they're learning.
All right, so we know the standards aren't just for us. These ELD standards are not just for our teachers of language learners. They are really used in collaboration with our grade level content area teachers. And so we want to make sure that all of our students can be successful in school all day long. Most of us serve students for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and we know the partnership with our content teachers is critical, that they understand the standards as well and how those standards apply to their standards. For administrators, we know that they help us drive instruction and that they can help coordinate that language growth. So, we have a crosswalk that we've created. All right? Multiple.
Let's be many.
Today, we are talking about ELA, because ELA most closely aligns with all of that. And Christina's going to go into, the crosswalk that we're talking about today is the one that she developed. I worked on math. If you were part of that crosswalk and are here today, will you raise your hand? I saw several familiar faces. So if you have a colleague that worked on that intensively, you please thank them. That was some of the most emotionally and intellectually exhausting work, I think, even after getting a doctorate, I have ever done. Y'all can laugh at me, but it was intense. And I have never seen a group of educators collaboratively work together. Egos were left at the door. And we had a lot of well-degreed people in the room. And I was so impressed with all of the people that showed up, were dedicated to the work, and it was impressive. So it's going to be organized by strand. It's going to be all those things. You're going to be impressed with how much work these ladies have put into the ELA part of this. And Christina's going to explain to you how to use this. Oh, I'm assuming if you scan this QR code.
Yes, so before we get started, I'm going to give you just a second to either input that tiny URL link to access the 6th grade ELD Crosswalk, ELA ELD Crosswalk, or scan in. It might be a little bit harder to use it on your phone. It's a pretty massive document, so I do recommend if you have a laptop to use the link below. I'll give you just a second, but if you could stay focused with me because it's such a huge document, I'm going to be starting on page 13, and if you go or scroll to page 13, it's going to be the same image that you're viewing here on the screen. So we can look at that together and talk through how that graphic kind of works, that table. All right. Before we get going, we're going to kind of be looking through the ELD standards matrix. And these are kind of organized by different strands in each standard that you'll be teaching. So like if you're going to be teaching 6th grade or you're working with a group of 6th grade teachers, you would pull up the 6th grade guide. So each grade level will have a different guide for ELA just because they're such huge, massive documents. But this really is the ELD 6th grade academic standards matrix that we're looking at. So this looks very similar if you have been in your standards. How many? Give me a thumbs up or a hand if you've actually looked at the matrix that's featured within the ELPA 21 standards. Yeah, so huge work here. Now you have one aligned directly to Tennessee standards or Tennessee ELA standards. So instead of it being aligned to Common Core, our task force and our collaborative have kind of gone through this, our working group have gone through and really talked through each ELA standard to kind of really make sure that for Tennessee, which ELD standard is incorporated into our ELA standards, which one kind of links to them. So when you look at the first column, you're looking directly at the Tennessee ELD standards. So you can see here featured 1, 2, 3, and on your screen you should see all the way to standard 10. Is that correct? Awesome. So you got your ELD standard on the left, and then as you kind of go over to the right, you can see our foundational literacy. Literacy is kind of incorporated into those key areas of ELA instruction. You're able to see the listed standard that incorporates or links to that Tennessee ELD standard. So it works very similar to the one that's in the ELPA 21 document that you see at the beginning of every grade level. However, here it's aligned directly to Tennessee state standards. When you kind of scroll over, you're able to kind of see how they filter in based on their domains of what you're working on in ELA. So now we kind of thought, well, that's great for an ELD teacher or somebody who's directly teaching ELD standards, right? You have all the Tennessee standards listed at your fingertips. But really, this document is made for all educators. So sometimes somebody who's more focused on a standard needs a different view. So this is something new for just our crosswalk or our document. We created an ELA standards concordance. And I was nervous to even say that word. I think it reminds me of a airport, Concord Airport. And so this is like a reverse matrix. So this matrix that we're about to look at is very standard focused, and instead it gives you all the links to the ELD standards. So if you're kind of going in that planning stance, you're able to kind of say, you know what, we're really focusing heavily on this ELA standard. Where does that align within or fall within our ELD standards? So you can see here on the left, you have your academics ELA standard. So if you kind of have that standard in mind, that's where you're kind of going to go. You're going to go to the correct area. So this would be for writing. You have one for reading and literature, informational text. So you kind of look there first, and then your linked ELD standard would be on the right. So then you're able to easily see, oh, I'm working on this last writing standard here, and I can see that that writing standard is directly linked to ELD standard 3, 9, and 10. So it's a different view how you can kind of navigate this document to really get the most out of it and the most support that you need in order to use it as a practical tool. All right, so we're going to get into unpacking these standards.
So I'm going to give you just a moment now. This is your first look. You're the first public people looking at this document. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes, probably 2 minutes, to just take a look at the document, kind of see the format as we are going to be using this document for practice today. Again, if you have questions, this is the Padlet QR code with the little eagle in the middle. So feel free to ask or type your questions there, and we'll be able to respond to them. So again, about 2 minutes to just look at, maybe discuss with your neighbor what this document is. So as we start looking at this document, as Christina told you, every grade level will have a crosswalk associated. Every grade level will have a crosswalk. Today we're just looking at the 6th grade one. Each crosswalk is approximately 125 pages. Each grade level is about 125 pages. And so as we think about these documents, I'll give you an overview of it. The first 12 pages is an explanation about what the document is, which we just gave you. So in your spare time, you can read those first 12 pages, but it really kind of tells you our purpose and how it is set up. Exactly what Christina told you earlier about there being 2 types of matrices, one matrix that just has a ELD to ELA standard, and then the reverse matrix, which is the ELA standard to the ELD standard. So as we look at it, I just want to kind of point out that these crosswalks, as we get into the body of the document, not the matrix will help you know what page to look on. I will tell you that all the table of contents are linked, so you can click on the page number and it will take you to the actual crosswalk. So when we're talking about the crosswalk, we're talking about the meat. It's not the matrix, which is kind of the idea of where to go in the document, but it's the meat of the document. And so this is a supplemental tool that helps you figure out how to incorporate those ELD standards into your ELA lesson. What it is not is a replacement for your high quality instructional material. Your high quality instructional material is your key planning document, is your key planning tool. This is a supplemental tool to help you figure out when those access points there don't really tell you exactly where or how to incorporate the language needs of your students in the classroom. It is a collection, a very large collection of language features, things like language functions, language forms, sentence stems. What it is not is a collection of strategies that'll tell you how to do the teaching. We know that you are the experts in that. You put your own juju on your teaching in the classroom. So it is not a collection of strategies. And finally, it is a planning document to be used during planning. Three cases of planning that our ladies will tell you about in a minute, but it is a planning document that speaks to the teacher's instruction in the classroom. But it is not a can-do document that speaks to the student's proficiency level. We already have these tools. We already have the tools. So if you're thinking about the achievement level descriptors, you might know them in the ILP as the reporting performance descriptors, but these really describe what a student can do at a given proficiency level. No need to put that in the Crosswalk document because ELPA 21 has done that for us. Likewise, the ELPA 21 proficiency level descriptors is a planning document that can help you figure out what kind of strategies go along based on the proficiency level of the student. So again, additional supplementary tools to use with the Crosswalk to help implement your high quality instructional material. Again, QR code if you have questions. I'm going to turn it back over to the ladies who will finish telling you, unpacking the actual Crosswalk with you.
All right, you're going to see on your standard kind of some columns beside this stuff. So we're going to explain to you those columns. The first one you're going to see is your language vocabulary, your academic vocabulary, which is, as we know, not just that. This is like our tier vocabulary. Not just your tier 3 vocabulary, but more like your tier 2 vocabulary. What are the words they're going to run across that teachers are going to need to emphasize with that standard that's going to build a deeper knowledge of the students being able to use it? If you look at that, we have each group went through and said, these are kind of the words that we think go with that, and then they may repeat themselves. I'm just going to say that if you look at the whole thing. Our language function is how are we using language? How is it going to be used? And then how are they going to be able to expect to use it when they're reading, writing, listening, and speaking? We never go away from that. And the nice thing about this is because we believe that all students are language students, this can help support all learners in our classroom. And if you have any sort of diverse learner in your classroom, this can help you support them in their growth. Then we have our language forms and structures. The last two columns kind of give teachers some ideas of ways they can use that language in their instruction. Again, these are things that our colleagues pulled out and we felt needed to be emphasized for those standards. And in those groups, you had people that had expertise in those different areas. We could talk about this with grammar, but we know that in ELD teachers, we are not grammar teachers, but we use grammar as part of our teaching. And then the last one is questions and sentence stems. Christina's going to really explain and go into more depth on how these all kind of interwork. But you may or may not agree with what we chose as what we emphasized, but this is your document, and when you share it, you could emphasize things little differently. This is just a starting point for us to start thinking about that language and how students could use it.
So if you kind of scroll to page 39, that's the start of ELD Standard 2. You're able to kind of see how this document functions from the top down. So when you look at the top, you're able to see, again, that linking ELA standard that incorporates into your ELD standard. And then each standard is featured below. So you're able to see the standard listed with the language of the standard, directly taken from our ELA standard guides. And then as you scroll across, you're able to see these language features incorporated into that crosswalk. So how did this kind of get developed? All of ELA as a group, a massive group of over probably 30 professionals got together and kind of talked about what do we want these language features to look like, so there's some uniformity from grade K all the way through grade 12, which is not an easy endeavor. And so how it kind of functions is when you look at the academic language column, you're able to see a few words that are highlighted directly from that standard, that are incorporated directly from that standard. Is that the only academic language that you teach? No. But this is a great starting point for your teachers to figure out what words may they want to highlight for students so that they can make sure students are really incorporating those words into their own language. If you can use that word, you probably own that word. You know that word. And we definitely want our students to understand and know and use that academic vocabulary. That's key, that's huge for our students. As you kind of glance over to the next column, you're able to see those language functions. So what does that standard tell us that our students need to do when using their language? So you can see the bolded word directly talks about participate. When our students are doing this standard, we're wanting them to participate in group discussions. We want them to express their opinions. In order to meet the expectations for this standard, students need to be engaging in these language functions. And so that really highlights for teachers what students need to do in order to engage with the standard. As you continue to go to the yellow column, you're able to look at those language forms and language forms. This is where we had a huge amount of discussion. How do we want these language forms to kind of be listed so that there's uniformity? Because that is a huge, broad topic if you've gotten into it. And so what we wanted to do was really highlight, thinking of that general content teacher, the more nuanced aspects of language. So not what's directly in front of them, but things that they may forget that are incorporated into that standard that they could highlight in order to make their instruction, more language packed. So, they may be focused here on the idea of the discussion, but maybe they forget that they need to directly teach and expose students to transition words. And so this highlights for them, maybe you need to be kind of making sure that you're kind of directly teaching these aspects of language forms, but also it gives them a way to kind of formatively assess, are students really meeting the depth of those expectations? If I hear students using first, in addition to, furthermore, and however, I know my students are getting close to meeting that expectation of the standard. So it kind of is twofold. It gives you some direction as a practitioner, but it also gives you some areas where you can gather feedback to assess how much language are your students really using when they're meeting this standard. And then when you scroll to the last column, that's your question and sentence stems. And that's a great tool to kind of get any practitioner started on what questions could you ask to really get students to output or interact or produce the language that you're intending them to produce with that standard. So I could ask this question, it'll prompt them to give me some production. And then the sentence stems can either be used as a support, but also as a way for you to formatively understand as a teacher that students need to be using this type of language to meet those expectations. So again, like Raven said, it's not based on proficiency levels, right? So this is meeting the 6th grade standard. This is kind of the expectations of what language would look like at that 6th grade ELA level for all students. So it really is a tool for all students and a way for you to kind of figure out how does language fit into it, not a way to just create a support for a student. It's not intended for that. We have other tools for it. So we're going to get into, I think, some activities now, right? Yeah, so we're going to get into some activities. We're going to explain the activities. If you don't have, maybe you're kind of here as a solo practitioner, find another colleague maybe close by. I really feel like interacting and collaborating with others allows you to have deeper conversations. And so we're going to kind of be getting into how we use this crosswalk. Like Raven said at the beginning of the presentation, we're going to focus on 3 areas for how this crosswalk could be used. The first one is going to be in lesson prep. So kind of thinking through using this tool, I want you to get it, we know this tool can be used for quite many things, right? This crosswalk tool, but I want you to focus in on, okay, we're using this crosswalk tool right now as a planning tool, not for any other purpose, but to help plan for my instruction with those high quality materials, right? So I'm kind of got my high quality materials. I'm now diving into that standard. I'm trying to figure out, okay, high quality materials are driving my instruction. Now, how can I use this tool to really incorporate language into the standard that I'm teaching while using the high quality materials. So we're going to be looking at the matrix and the concordance in order to do this. If you want to scroll back with me, that's fine. If you want to try out using that concordance, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Again, that was on page 15, if you want to scroll with me. Our first endeavor is going to be to create an academic standard and content objective in a lesson. So that's our first goal with our activities. All right, so how can it help you? First thing we kind of have to remember is that this Crosswalk tool can help teachers to create that elusive language objective that we know that they need to kind of have with that content objective, right? Without a language objective, you haven't really thought through how will language function within my instructional goal. You can anticipate the academic language, but remember, it's not the only source of academic language. The high quality materials are your foundation for driving your instruction. You can identify the language functions like we talked earlier. How do students need to engage in that standard in order to kind of incorporate language? And you can use this tool to also plan mini lessons that may highlight those language forms that we talked about. Maybe you could be planning for them to have a conversation and them to explicitly use those transition words instead of just talking, right? Having talk with purpose is so much more beneficial for students. Anytime we can get them to talk with purpose, we're really engaging them in intentional language use and output. And then teachers could also use this to plan questions or sentence frames that may help them get to the depth of that standard and engage students in that standard and engage them to output that language. All right, so I've kind of aligned a standard that we're going to look at. If you are on that concordance, give me a thumbs up if you're on page 15 with me. Okay, I'm going to give you the standard right now. I want you to search for RL, KID, Key Ideas and Details, 1. This is your citing textual evidence standard. And give me a thumbs up when you found what ELD standards it kind of aligns to or links to. Awesome. On the count of 3, we're going to say those 2 standards out loud. Say it with me. 1, 2, 3.
1 and 4.
Yeah, you're with me. 1 and 4, because I'm about to release you so you know which standards. It's a huge document, right? So you're going to scroll. You can scroll to standard 1. Find your ELA standard, go across and look through it. Then you can scroll to standard 4, do another check to see did anything kind of shift because that's a different ELD standard. And you can use those 2 standards as a tool in order to create that content and language objective, all right? So we're gonna be using it to create that language objective. That's what you're gonna be doing with your collaborative professional team right now. So I'm gonna give you we'll start with 5, I'll do a check-in, see where we're at. I'm gonna give you some time to work on developing that language objective. When we're done, I'm forefront, I'm gonna ask for maybe 2 to 3 groups to share what they came up with for their language objective for RL Standard KID 1, and share that with the group. And I think they'll bring a microphone around. So just be aware that if you're gonna be brave and share, that's what's gonna happen. I like to be honest in the forefront. All right, we'll start with about 5 minutes.
Explicitly draw logical inferences, cite textual evidence. Explicitly draw logical inferences, cite textual evidence.
I just get it. Is that
Go back up to that first. Yeah, that's the one I've been using. Instruct grade level. KID 1.
That'd be standard 1. So there would need to be 2 like language objectives. There would need to be something tied to listening and reading.
Oh, we gotta have a language.
Yeah, so what is going to be the language?
Like whatever your reason is, yes. You have to really support it, which is the text. Based on
very handy. It's easier than me having to go.
The scaffolds are additional access points. I know I'm getting ahead, but.
All right. It's a huge document, right? First instinct would be like, oh my gosh, you're a little bit overwhelmed. Like, would we need to create a language objective for every language function or form on this document, or for every academic word on this document? The answer is no. We know as practitioners that when you're really trying to think through that objective, having really focused objectives for what you're trying to achieve, maybe one thing that you're trying to really make sure that you're exposing students through instruction with, and then measuring through formative assessment, it's better to have one or two things that you're really trying to get to than to have an exhausted list of a ton of objectives, right? So thinking through, maybe one objective that I really feel like at this moment would be beneficial for my students in order to incorporate the language of that standard is really the key. And so you're just using that tool as a menu of possible areas. Is that the exhausted list? No. But it's a great starting point for how language can be incorporated into that standard. So do I have any brave souls that would like to share maybe one of the language objectives that they created? I'm looking for 2 to 3 volunteer groups. 2 to 3 volunteer groups. All right, we got one over here. Thank you.
Is this thing on? Well, we put together one standard in the time that we had, and we were kind of thinking about a language objective, including that form, that function, and the support.
Oh, neat.
And we just took it directly from the document. It says the student will analyze word structure by determining etymology patterns with the help of reference materials, and sentence stems such as the spelling of blank suggest it comes from blank.
Yeah, I can always tell when I'm talking to a secondary teacher. Do you work with secondary students?
Yes, I do.
It's like a whole different level. My elementary teachers that I know in the room kind of did this eyeball look of like, oh my gosh.
Well, and I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't know what we're learning. I just know how to put the parts together to make it sound good.
Yeah, so you're really, like, anytime you're creating any objective using any of those components, you're really easily creating a language objective, right? Because the whole document addresses language. So let's see if we can hear one more volunteer.
I just had students will be able to cite textual evidence to support analysis of a text and make an inference.
Wonderful. The neat thing is we can see how closely that content objective to the language objective kind of can be, just because it is the nature of English language arts. When you get into the crosswalks for other content areas, it really becomes even more important to have a tool like this because, as we kind of gravitate over to the subject of math per se, I think Dr. Tennyson worked as a leader on that crosswalk document, it becomes very content focused for those teachers. And so anytime you're using this tool, it's really easy to start that discussion on how does language incorporate or link to what you're doing in those content areas. And so that creation becomes a lot more feasible for all practitioners. Wonderful. So we're going to keep working through. I think we're going to go to our next activity.
Okay, so we're going to stay in this same standard, citing textual evidence. But we're going to talk about PLCs. PLCs are really where we hope that our grade level teachers will pull out these documents and use them. For instance, English 1, I'm going to kind of stick to secondary because that's what I am. English 1, I'm going to give you a vision in my head. English 1, they have several diverse learners, not just ESL, but several diverse learners that need support. So they're going to pull out this document with their high quality instructional material, their approved curriculum for their district, and they're going to use these in conjunction with each other to support that language development. It gives all students access to engage in that high quality instructional material, and it's going to help them scaffold that instruction. All right? So, it will help them plan scaffolds. It will help them find additional access points. Remember, I said this document is only a beginning. It may be that those people with expertise in the room in English go, oh, well, this is great, but for this text, this high quality instructional material, we're going to add some things to this chart along the lines of what we've developed. Okay? It's going to give descriptors. It's going to give them questions and sentence stems. Like she said, what questions can we ask these students that will help them develop that language? And the questions, I think, are key, because sometimes when we are developing our lesson plans, we get a little overwhelmed or we aren't sure where to start. And this document is where these teachers will hopefully start. And then we did Spanish cognates. We stuck with Spanish cognates because we want to support their English language development. And we also know that not all students sitting in our classroom speak Spanish. So we don't want to get off on that tangent of languages. And we want to stay true to our English instruction. All right, so I want to kind of survey the room. Raise your hand if you're elementary and you ever get to go to a PLC planning. Okay? That's awesome, and ideally that's what we would love, right? It's not always, we don't know. Every school is different, every principal is different in their visions, and so, but if you can participate in that PLC process, even if it's only once a month, then hopefully you can help train your teachers how to use this to support that lesson prep that Christina just talked about. If you're not able to get to go to those PLCs, but you want to encourage your principal, your instructional coaches to use this in PLC, may need a microphone. What are some other ways that you can communicate with PLCs? I want some ideas. I have my own ideas. I always have ideas. But I want to hear from people, elementary and middle, specifically right now. I'm going to go to high school in a minute. Anybody else? How do you all communicate and support your grade level teachers at your schools?
Email.
Email. She's going to bring you a microphone.
I just said lots of email because we're teaching 6 different grade levels a day. We cannot attend. We're lucky if we can attend the data meetings, so I'm excited about that. But for PLC, so lots of emails. We do have access to the content teachers' plans through Plan Book or Schoology. So we do hop in there sometimes, and we could shoot them an email with the link. Don't forget your language standard. But we present sometimes in the beginning of the school year, and we'll put things on a Google Drive, and we'll embed that link in the presentation so they can refer back to that, and they've got that link. You could also put a little link on your daily announcements, like don't forget this is the link to the Crosswalk or whatever. So lots of emails.
Well, we hope that eventually our grade level teachers don't need us anyway. We want to get them so that they're using that without our pushing it. How many of you use email to communicate most everything? We all do. It's the best way, right? But we also know email can't be long because none of us want to read long emails. All right. And she also said something about presenting at the beginning of the school year. And this is me, and I'm going to advocate for you all to advocate for yourselves. We have to be those people that are going to advocate. Hey, Mrs. Adams, we have this amazing new tool from the state to support our students, and can I get a little bit of time in the beginning of the year maybe, or can I have some time come out of my classroom and go to some of the different PLCs? We've done it different ways. We speak sometimes as whole group. We found at our school, small group tends to get more bang for our buck than a big presentation at the beginning of the year if we can get in those PLCs. So I believe PLC work is going to be where these grade level teachers are going to use it the most. And so I'm going to encourage you to know your voice has value regardless of what our communities are saying. We are valuable and our voice is valuable. Don't ever let somebody tell you your voice is not valuable. All right, so we got another activity to go for PLCs. Okay, we're going to use that same exact standard, which was on page 15?
39.
39, sorry. So, how many of you look at student work? Anybody look at student work? Okay. So let's say, pretend you were invited to go to that PLC because your 3rd grade ELA teachers, your 7th grade ELA teachers were not, aren't getting the growth out of their EL students. And you say, okay, I'll come to your PLC, let's look at a piece of text and let's figure out some things that we can do, okay? So, we pretend you have a piece of work. We don't have a piece of work. Maybe we should have made a piece of work up. But so use a crosswalk to identify language expectations if observed breakdowns are language or content related. So how can you tell the difference, right? So same thing she said, same standard. Let's pretend there are breakdowns, right? Okay. How are you going to support your grade level teachers, or how could they use this crosswalk to support themselves? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk about it because, you know, this is where a lot of times, hey, we have this student, they're not learning, right? This is where you're going to be using a lot of this. Did you have anything?
And we know that we have kids at all different proficiency levels sitting in content classrooms or your own classrooms, right? So kind of think with a student in mind. Sometimes that makes these activities easier. A student in mind that's at a particular level, and the teacher needs to know where a breakdown might happen, and maybe don't even think about it necessarily as a breakdown, but an area of opportunity for that student to progress with the learning of that standard, to get to a new level of learning for that standard. So what area might they want to highlight? Because it's the next step for that student to take in their language development in order to kind of begin to meet the expectations of that standard. And so you're trying to highlight that for the team of teachers in that PLC. I think this may be very valid for our students because of this reason. And so you're using that crosswalk tool to kind of identify those areas of language expectations and possible areas of opportunity for instruction that may support that student to get closer to the expectations.
All right, 5 minutes.
Like evidence. Down with that.
Yeah, we can do this like different also.
When I say developing multiple, we're looking at one.
Yeah.
Okay. And we see that the student knows how to analyze and to cite, but are having trouble including personal inferences. And so we use the information to go back and to define
what an inference is and give an example and model.
But like I also like the questions.
All right. Instead of just blindly asking for volunteers, I went up to a couple of people and asked them to volunteer. Because oftentimes, this is the exact scenario we get in our classrooms. Nobody wants to talk. So, one of our colleagues from the collaborative is going to go first. What is your name?
Stephanie.
Stephanie is going to talk about something she could do to help teachers observe where those breakdowns might be in that language.
So I think most importantly, when you're analyzing your students' work, you want to make sure you have this document in front of you. And not only as the ELD teacher or the ELL teacher, you want your general ed teachers to also have access to this so that they know what that student expectation is and provide it to them and say, okay, if we're looking at what they've written, are they using some of these language domains? Are they using the vocabulary? And are they responding in a way that the expectation that you've set for them? And then talk about what will those next steps be. Are they needing to work more on citing your text evidence? Do they need to go back to their text? Do they need, if you're expecting them to write it, do they need to work on that writing domain and expanding the information and making sure that they have more detail? And two, that they're understanding what the output needs to be. If your students are understanding what their output's gonna be, there's not gonna be that success for them, and it can then cause them to maybe shut down and then not get the language output expected.
I would like to build on that just a little bit, and also maybe the teachers didn't scaffold it enough, and so maybe you could help them understand how to scaffold it a little bit more. So this, I don't know, okay, she's speaking. This lady right here is going to speak next.
Mackenzie.
Thank you, young man.
Thank you. We talked a little bit about that scaffolding as well. If the teacher has taught citing textual evidence about a text and it's not working for our ELL students, a breakdown that could occur is maybe they didn't highlight the sentence stems that are in this crosswalk enough. So we suggested maybe the teacher having that on the wall or on the board for the students repeatedly to look at. That way they kind of memorize and internalize them. And if the breakdown's content related, maybe the student just didn't understand the text, and so they don't understand the text. Maybe that's a modeling issue, or they need some extra summaries or something like that in order to be able to cite evidence.
Anybody else want to talk? I think they both highlighted very important parts of PLC. And I do want to say this. In the new, or not necessarily newish, Acceleration for All, it is an expectation that we as the English language development specialists in our building are supporting those PLCs. So hopefully we can see kind of that developed more and more.
So we have our last activity. We're going to really be diving in. A lot of you have been referencing this idea of really looking at student work, and I love that because that's the way that you formatively assess your students. So with that in mind, let's kind of think through this idea of formative assessment. There's a difference between the two areas of formative assessment, right? So you got your formative assessment of content, and then you have this added lens of formative assessment of language. Let's focus on language just for a second, because this may be an area of support that you need to kind of think through with your teachers. So formative assessment of language is really you trying to get a gauge on the progression of your student as they're progressing in the different language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, right? You're trying to get that assessment of how far are they moving with their language proficiency, and what instructional actions do I need to take to continue to get them to grow. So what could that look like? It could look like an exit ticket. Maybe in that exit ticket, you're focusing in on vocabulary use and verb tense. So instead of the exit ticket measuring solely content understanding, you are looking at that exit ticket in particular for verb tense use and what vocabulary they chose to use when responding to that sentence frame. So it's a little bit more nuanced than content. Let's think about retelling a story, right? So that could be a way that you're assessing their comprehension of reading. How much do they understand in a story? But when we put that language lens on formative assessment, all of a sudden we're trying to gauge, are they using transition words to sequence the story in order instead of it solely being based on did they comprehend the story? So it's a nuanced lens that you have to place on your formative assessment in order to gauge language proficiency. So that's where we're going with this activity. We're really kind of focusing in on how can this Crosswalk tool help us really look at student language and how well they're progressing. So what tools would you kind of need to do that? In addition to this Crosswalk tool, you would bring in other tools, such as maybe an ELD rubric, maybe using your performance level descriptors in order to kind of get other areas to assess. Because again, remember the Crosswalk tool doesn't tell you the different proficiency levels, right? So you're going to have to bring in outside tools in order to do that work. You might be working with a checklist. right? So from this document, you develop a checklist to gauge if students are meeting language expectation, or maybe you're looking through annotated work samples. All of those could be valid forms of formative assessment tools that you could be using at this time. As you go through to kind of assess content understanding, that goal shifts to the skills and if they're able to perform with those skills. So taking that retell, same idea, language, we're looking for transition words. Retell, we're looking for accurate comprehension and retelling of the story. Did those events actually happen in the story? Are they in the correct order? Did they highlight the character? Did they highlight the setting? Did they highlight the major plot point? Did they get the ending to the story correct? So it's a little bit different lenses. You have to have both in order to create a full picture of the student, right? You can't just have one without the other. All right, so for your activity, you're going to use that same crosswalk tool. We're going to just stick to the same standards. So you could be looking through, looking at that RL Kid 1 standard. It's featured in ELD 1. That might be an easier one to kind of think through because that's more of your receptive language for reading. If you want to challenge yourself, maybe move on to standard 4. Use that one and try a different view of it. And what you're going to do is you're going to plan a writing task or a discourse task that will allow you to formatively assess students, that they're able to have access to, engage with, and linguistically support your English learner as they're trying to show their progress towards expectations of that standard. So you're thinking through a task, either through speaking or writing, that you would create to have students demonstrate their progression towards expectations of that standard. All right? All right, we're running a little bit shorter on time, so about 5 minutes, and then we'll debrief. So I will be looking for maybe 1 to 2 volunteers to share just what task you kind of came up with.
Like the tense. That's hard. Maybe we're
I like the
aggressive.
Yes. Yeah, I like the and you could use that sentence phrase.
It's something that we want to see, and it's just another like data point to have that's independently done. Whoever's planning can do, one a week or one every other week or whatever it is, just to have that like.
Yeah. Because
all right, we're just going to go for 1 volunteer. And when I went around asking volunteers, I think this is something that teachers might be a little bit struggling with. So Penny's group over here, I went around and asked for volunteers. If somebody else wants to talk, absolutely. So how could you use this as a planning tool for academic discourse and or writing to support that citing textual evidence?
We're going to keep it very simple and use the question and stems and use that as an exit ticket, just to where it's a quick, take on if they've got it or didn't get it.
All right. So what do we feel is sometimes more beneficial, discourse or writing for citing textual evidence?
Writing.
Probably writing. So I love the exit ticket idea. Does anybody else have something they wanted to add to that? Okay. So the crosswalk can help you do so many things. I think we have only touched the surface of this, and we hope that you will pull it up, use it in your planning, and most importantly, support those ELA teachers as they plan, because we know we don't see the kids but a few minutes a day.
So we will be taking a break in about 10 minutes, but until then I want to address some questions. But the first thing that I want to do is tell you a few updates about the crosswalk. So you got the first peek at it. What do you think? I'm going to ask you to use a rating scale. And if you think, I'm going to be using this a little bit, I want you to go, woo. And if you think you're going to be using a lot, I want you to go, woo, right? Okay, so on the count of 3, I want to hear how you think you'll be using this. 1, 2, 3. Woo! Okay, great. That's what I wanted to hear. So I think this is such a beneficial tool to you. So you might be asking this question. Raven, 6th grade is great. I know you had to just choose one thing today because we can't go through every 125-page document for every grade level. Where are these documents? These documents will be posted on the Tennessee.gov website under Student Supports, English Learner Resources, Educator Resources. I will tell you, they are not up yet. They are in the process of being, if you go to that page, it will actually tell you that the page is down right now. Guess what? Because they're being uploaded. The total combination of all 1,600, of all the documents was over 1,600 pages. And so I would be remiss if I did not tell you that a fantastic group of folks, I know we've said it time and time again, this has been my work for the last year, but these folks came together, and Chris wasn't kidding. They were probably like, what is this crazy lady got us into those 3 days? But if you were part of the ESL working group who helped create the matrix, or part of the ESL or the ELD collaborative, would you just please stand up and let us give you a round of applause for this? Thank you. I'm so proud of our folks. I will tell you that the crosswalk that you did look at was led by Christina Danko. We did have Casey Minshaw from Metro Nashville leading the elementary ELA. You say, oh, that's great, but I need math and social studies and science. Great news. We also did those. We are waiting for the release of those. We want you to get your feet wet with this one. This is the big document, right? This is the big one where we do standards, ELD standards to ELA standards. Our social studies, mathematics, and new science standards are to practices. And so that crosswalk will be released later. Those crosswalks will be released later in this school year. But we want you to learn how to use this one first. This is also really building into that acceleration for all momentum that you should be asking your school administrators about, or your district folks about, if you haven't heard about that. But I do just want to point out these 36 fantastic folks. Dr. Tennyson is our facilitator for our math crosswalk, so that will be the next one released. I did want to just address some of your questions about the crosswalk in general. So one of the questions is, again, where will you find those? TEN.gov under Student Support, Educator Resources under English Learners. They will be there divided by grade level. So you will see ELD, ELA, crosswalk, K, 1, 2, 3, all the way up. I will tell you that in high school, 9, 10 is combined and 11, 12 is combined, because that's how the standards are combined. And so you can find those there. I had a question, if you, will the science have the new standards because they have new standards this year, or will it be based on last year's standards? It will be based on the new standards. We've had folks that are helping kind of bridge that over to the new standards. We're using the same practices that have been incorporated previously. The next question is, will it be required that you teach the use of these crosswalks? So this crosswalk, again, is a supplemental tool for you. It's just one more thing to put in your toolbox, but it's not just one more thing, right? It's something that you can take with your high quality instructional material and say, hey, there is a way to incorporate language into the work the content work that we're doing in the classroom. And as you take that tool back, it is not required. ESL rule does say that you must train teachers on ELD standards. This is just a fantastic way to do it. It's to introduce them to the 10 ELD standards, show them this crosswalk and how it can be beneficial to them. So again, it doesn't become one more thing, but another tool that really helps them in not just their planning, but also PLC, also informative assessment for students, and ultimately helps students perform better on the summative assessment, in which Nancy will come and talk about just after the break. Let me check one more time if there's any additional questions about the crosswalk. Were any of the former state assessment questions and assessment rubrics used to develop the ELD crosswalk? So if you've been around for a minute, you know that we transitioned from WIDA to ELPA 21 this past year. That's why we have Nancy talking with us today. And this is the first year that we have administered that assessment. So in making that crosswalk, we know that WIDA measured language differently in the summative assessment than ELPA 21 does. It's also a brand new year and we've never administered it before. But we did use the ELPA 21 ALDs, which are now becoming the reporting performance level descriptors. So you might hear them called the RPLDs or the reporting PLDs. We did use the PLDs, that tool for educators. We did use other educator resources from ELPA 21, including things like the poster and the assessment, the toolkit, and the document that CCSSO did in alignment for Common Core state standards with ELPA 21 when they created that, I believe, in 2014. So we did use those resources from ELPA 21 to make sure that our focus of those 4 areas, academic vocabulary, language function, language forms and structures, and those sentence stems kind of align to how students might be answering on that summative assessment. But ultimately this tool is set to tie to our standards, which is the expectation of all students in our schools. And on that, Dr. Clark, I really thank you for listening. I hope that if you have questions, on almost the very last page before the appendices, there is my email there, and we'll give you our contact information at the end. If you see something in it that you really like or that you have questions about, or if you see an error, again, you're the first people to look at this, please drop me an email and let me know, and I hope that this can be a very successful tool that you can use this year.
Wow. Yes.